My name is Lydia Collins, and the day my marriage cracked open was not during an argument or a dramatic confession. It happened in the middle of a real estate viewing while my husband and I stood inside a bright modern condo owned by a German expat. I pretended I did not understand a single word of what they were saying, but then I heard one sentence that split my world in half. For 15 years I had been the quiet wife, the agreeable one, the one who kept her head down, kept the house running, and tried not to disturb the peace. Ethan, my husband, liked it that way. He had a strong job, a strong voice, and a firm belief that he naturally knew better about everything. I had a modest accounting job at a small firm and a habit of tucking my thoughts away before they reached my lips. As the years went by, I barely recognized myself. I moved through life softly, avoiding his irritation the way someone avoids sharp edges in the dark. I learned to make myself smaller in every conversation, every decision, every room. But that morning, as we rode the elevator up to the 12th floor of that sleek building, something in me shifted. It was faint, like a quiet tapping inside my chest, reminding me that the life I was living was not the only life possible. I did not know it yet, but I was about to hear the truth that would force me to face everything I had ignored, the truth that would push me toward the woman I had almost forgotten I could be. For most people, home is where they exhale. For me, home became the place where I held my breath. Ethan filled every corner of our life with his opinions, his routines, and his decisions. At first I thought it was confidence. Over the years I realized it was control dressed up as certainty. He managed our vacations, our purchases, our weekends. If I suggested something different, he would dismiss it with a wave of his hand or a tired sigh, as if my ideas were small inconveniences instead of real thoughts. When I once brought up taking a floral design class after work, he laughed so quickly and so loudly that I felt foolish for even mentioning it. He called it a waste of money and predicted I would quit after a month. I stopped talking about hobbies after that. Work was not much different. My accounting position paid the basics, and Ethan made sure I remembered that his job was the backbone of our household. Whenever we argued, he reminded me that he paid the mortgage, the car note, the upgrades, the vacations. It was a reminder that came with a sting, as if my contributions were invisible unless he pointed them out. Even our evenings followed a predictable script. He settled into the living room with the television on full volume, and I drifted quietly through the apartment, cooking, cleaning, and trying not to disturb him. The more silent I became, the easier everything felt for him, and the harder it became for me. Looking back, I realize how subtle the shift was. It was not one fight or one harsh sentence. It was the steady erosion of being unheard. The slow fading of my voice inside a marriage that had once been full of laughter. And yet, I stayed. I stayed because I believed that patience might bring back what we lost. I stayed because I thought love meant trying harder. I stayed because I thought I was the problem. My turning point did not arrive with fireworks. It came quietly, the way most life changes do, disguised as curiosity on a night like any other. I was scrolling through my phone after cleaning up the kitchen when an advertisement popped up for a free online German course. I almost kept scrolling, but something made me pause. Maybe it was the thought of doing something new, something that belonged only to me. I clicked on it. That small decision became the first doorway out of the life I felt trapped in. At first I studied only 15 minutes a night, whispering simple words while Ethan watched sports in the living room. I always kept the bedroom door almost closed, letting the television noise cover the quiet sounds of my lessons. It felt exciting in a way I had not felt in years. My brain woke up. My thoughts stretched. I was learning something, not for work and not for Ethan, but for myself. 15 minutes turned into 30. Then an hour. Soon I had a notebook full of vocabulary and grammar charts, tucked carefully under a stack of blankets. My progress surprised me. I understood short videos without subtitles. I could read basic articles. The app I used even complimented my pronunciation, and each time it did, I felt a spark inside me grow. But I never told Ethan. Not because I wanted to hide it forever, but because the thought of his reaction made my chest tighten. I could already hear his voice calling it pointless, silly, unnecessary. He would ask why I was learning a language that had nothing to do with my job or our life. And beneath his words, I would hear the same message he always delivered: you are not capable. You will never finish anything. You are wasting time. So I kept it secret. That small pocket of solitude became the only place where I did not feel judged. It was mine, untouched by his opinions, my quiet rebellion, my quiet freedom. I did not realize then that this secret would one day become the very thing that saved me. The next morning, Ethan walked into the bedroom holding his phone like he had just discovered treasure. He told me he had found a condo listed by a German man named Hans Ritter. According to him, it was the best option we had seen in months. He did not ask what I thought. He simply announced that we would be viewing it the following day. I nodded the way he expected me to. When we arrived at the building, everything felt polished and new. The lobby smelled like fresh coffee and clean air. Ethan looked around proudly, as if he had built the place himself. I followed silently, holding my purse close, reminding myself of the plan. I would say nothing. I would pretend not to understand a word of German. I wanted to see how he spoke when he believed I could not hear the truth. Hans opened the door with a warm smile. He was tall, calm, the kind of man who made a room feel lighter. Ethan immediately switched to German, just as I knew he would. I stayed close to the wall and kept my expression neutral, listening as Hans welcomed us in and apologized for what he called a small mess, even though the apartment looked spotless. The more Hans spoke, the more carefully I listened. Ethan translated bits to me in English, but his versions were flat and incomplete. When Hans mentioned that the building management was excellent, Ethan told me they were only average. When Hans explained the neighbors were professors and doctors, Ethan shrugged and said they were regular people. He even added comments that Hans never said. It was subtle at first, then obvious. He was controlling the narrative, shaping the apartment into something that matched his agenda. Yet the condo was beautiful. Bright windows, smooth wooden floors, a kitchen that felt like a dream. I whispered that I liked it, and Ethan brushed it off with a quick nod before turning back to his conversation with Hans. As they moved from room to room discussing details, I stayed quiet, staring at the life I thought we might share here. But something deeper than admiration was building inside me. The more I listened, the more I realized this viewing was not just about real estate. It was the beginning of a truth I could no longer avoid. We eventually circled back to the living room where Hans offered us coffee. Ethan accepted before I could answer, as if my preferences were a minor detail in a conversation meant for bigger minds. I sat on the edge of the sofa, hands folded tightly in my lap, my heart beating hard enough that I felt it in my throat. Hans spoke warmly about his years in the condo, about returning to his family in Germany, and about wanting the place to go to someone who would take good care of it. Ethan translated none of that. He offered me the shortest versions possible, cutting out anything that might make Hans seem more human or sincere. Then the conversation shifted to paperwork, and I heard Ethan's tone grow sharper, more focused. Hans explained a common practice. Sometimes properties were registered under one spouse at first to make the administrative work easier. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. But then he asked Ethan directly if he wanted to consider that option. What happened next was the moment my world cracked open. Ethan leaned back slightly, lowered his voice, and said in German, "She does not need to know. She does not understand anything anyway. I am the one paying. I am the one deciding. It is none of her concern." I froze. My hands went cold. My cup trembled. Every word pressed into me like a blade. None of her concern. Not my home, not my future, not my life. I stared at the floor as Ethan continued the conversation with a relaxed confidence, unaware that the woman sitting inches away could feel her entire marriage coming apart thread by thread. In that moment, things inside me shifted. It was not anger at first. It was grief. The kind of grief you feel when you realize someone you trusted never truly saw you as an equal. For years, I had been shrinking myself, believing my voice just needed more patience or more kindness or more effort. But now I saw the truth. My voice had never mattered to him at all. And once you hear something like that, you cannot go back to pretending you did not. The drive home felt strangely quiet. Ethan hummed along to a pop song on the radio, tapping his fingers against the steering wheel as if the day had gone exactly the way he planned. Meanwhile, I stared out the window, replaying his words over and over until they formed a knot in my chest so tight I could hardly breathe. When we walked through the front door, he headed straight for the sofa. The television clicked on, filling the room with voices and noise. I stood in the hallway for a moment, gripping the strap of my purse. Normally, I would wait for a calmer moment. I would gather courage slowly, over hours or days, but something inside me no longer allowed silence. I stepped into the living room. Ethan did not look away from the screen. "We need to talk," I said. He sighed loudly, as if my voice were an interruption instead of a request. Can it wait, Lydia? I just sat down. No, not this time. He looked over at me, eyebrows drawn together. He was not used to hearing firmness in my tone. It startled him. I asked him directly whose name he planned to put on the deed. He blinked, confused, then quickly answered that of course it would be both of ours. He said it so casually that for a second I wondered if he truly believed his own lie. I told him what I heard, every word, in his language. The color drained from his face. He stood up slowly, as if unsure of how to arrange his features. You understand German, he muttered. Since when? The question did not matter. The betrayal did. I confronted him, forcing out the words I had swallowed for years. He defended himself with the same routine arguments. He provided for us. He handled things better. He knew how the world worked. I was overreacting. He paced the room, raising his voice, shifting blame back to me, anything to avoid looking at what he had done. But for the first time in our marriage, his words did not sink into me. They hit a wall. Because I finally had one. When I said I no longer trusted him, something in his expression fractured. He looked at me as if my defiance was the one betrayal he could not accept. But it was too late. He had already betrayed us both. For a long moment after our argument, the apartment felt painfully still. Ethan stood near the window with his hands on his hips, breathing hard, as if he were the one who had been wronged. I sat on the edge of a dining chair, feeling the last threads of our marriage slip quietly through my fingers. He finally turned toward me. So what now, Lydia? You want to punish me for something you misunderstood? I shook my head. I understood perfectly. You planned to take control of everything and leave me with nothing. He scoffed, pacing again. You always think the worst. I was simplifying the process. That is all. Then we would fix it later. But he had no explanation for why he told a stranger that it was none of my business. No explanation for why he was so comfortable speaking about me like I was a child instead of a partner. I told him calmly that I could not continue living like this. His face tightened. He asked if I was threatening him with divorce. For the first time, I answered without fear. I am telling you I cannot stay in a marriage where my voice means nothing. That sentence landed like a stone in the room. Ethan looked startled, almost offended, as if I no longer played the role he had written for me. He grabbed his keys, muttering under his breath, saying he needed space to think. He announced he would stay at his friend Jamal's place for a few days. He said it with the confidence of a man who expected me to come to my senses while he was gone. He walked out without closing the door gently. It slammed behind him. When the sound faded, the silence that followed was different. It no longer felt heavy. It felt honest. I walked to the bedroom, sat on the floor, and let myself finally cry. Not because I wanted him back. Not because I regretted speaking up. I cried for the years I lost, for the places inside me I abandoned, and for the version of myself I had almost forgotten. But beneath the grief, there was something else too, growing quietly. Relief. And the beginning of courage. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a mind that would not stay still. Ethan had not come home, and for once, I did not wonder where he was or what he was doing. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, my phone in my hand, and a decision weighing on my chest. I needed to call Hans. My fingers trembled as I dialed his number. Part of me feared he would think I was foolish or dramatic, but when he answered, his voice was warm and steady, the same calm tone he had used the day before. This is Lydia Collins, I said. We viewed your condo yesterday. A moment of silence followed, then he said gently, You speak German. Yes, I admitted it quietly, and I heard everything, every word. Hans let out a slow breath. I thought so, he said. You were very quiet, too quiet. I suspected you understood more than your husband realized. I apologized for the awkwardness, told him we would not be buying the condo, that I was sorry for wasting his time. But before I could finish, he stopped me. Lydia, please, do not apologize. Yesterday reminded me of something I went through with my own daughter. She was once married to a man who tried to decide everything for her. She left that marriage and built a much better life. When I saw you sitting there silent, I saw the same pain. Something inside me softened, and for the first time since the argument with Ethan, I felt seen. He continued, I want to help you. If you still want the condo, I can lower the price a bit. And I can wait while you sort through your situation. I am not in a hurry to sell. It took me a moment to find my voice. Why would you do that for me? because everyone deserves a fair chance to start over, and because no woman should be made to feel small in her own home. His words hit something deep inside me. Hope. A small, trembling hope that maybe my life did not have to stay the way it was. I told him I needed time. He told me to take all I needed. It was the first time in a long while that someone believed I could stand on my own. The days that followed felt blurry, as if I were walking through a hallway filled with doors I had never noticed before. Some led to fear, some to uncertainty, but one door led to something I had not felt in years: possibility. Ethan returned after 3 days, quiet and withdrawn. He slept on the sofa, left early, and came home late. We barely spoke. There was a time when this coldness would have crushed me. Now, it only confirmed what I already knew. We were done pretending. While he drifted through the apartment like a shadow, I sat at the kitchen table each night, studying something new: information about divorce, property rights, mortgages, and financial independence. For the first time, I was planning a future that did not revolve around his approval. I learned that I could legally claim half of our condo. With that money and my steady work history, a bank might approve a mortgage. The thought was terrifying and thrilling. I had never made a major life decision without Ethan. But every article I read, every calculator I filled out, every forum post from women who had rebuilt their lives gave me strength. Then, almost as if the universe wanted to test my determination, I found a job posting. An international company was looking for an accounting specialist who could work with their European branches. German required. My heart jumped. I submitted my application before I could talk myself out of it. The interview came fast. I sat across from the hiring manager and spoke confidently in the language I once whispered in secret. When she smiled and said, "Impressed. We need people like you here," I felt something inside me rise. A week later I got the job: higher pay, better benefits, a future. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had opened a door that truly belonged to me. When the divorce paperwork finally began moving forward, the weight on my shoulders started to lift. Ethan and I agreed to split the condo, and he offered to buy out my share. It was the most practical option, and for once, neither of us argued. When the transfer went through, I held the check in my hands for a long moment, feeling something unfamiliar settle inside me. Security, independence, the beginning of my own footing. With my new job underway, my days became fuller, brighter, and strangely steadier. I handled financial reports for international branches, emailed colleagues overseas, and joined online meetings where my German no longer had to be hidden. Each accomplishment felt like reclaiming a part of myself that had been buried under years of self-doubt. Hans kept his promise. He waited patiently while I finalized the divorce and gathered my documents. When the bank approved my mortgage, I signed the papers with hands that trembled, not from fear but from pride. The keys to his condo, the condo that would become my home, rested in my palm, like a symbol of a life I had built with my own strength. Around that time, I enrolled in an evening certification course to advance my skills. On the third class, a tall man with steady eyes and an easy smile sat beside me. "Is this seat taken?" he asked. "No, go ahead," I said. His name was Julian Brooks. Divorced, starting over, learning new things. When he spoke, he listened as much as he talked, something I was not used to. After class, we shared notes and walked to the parking lot together. It became a routine. Soon we were meeting early to study and staying late to talk about work, life, and second chances. Julian never pushed, never rushed. His presence was gentle, patient, and respectful. Being around him felt like taking a deep breath after years of holding it in. I was not looking for someone new. But life has a way of giving you exactly the reminders you need. That kindness exists. That respect is possible. That love does not have to hurt. A full year passed before I realized how far I had traveled from the woman I once was. One evening, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my condo, watching the city lights reflect against the river. The rooms around me were quiet, warm, and unmistakably mine. Every chair, every picture frame, every small detail had been chosen by my own hands. Julian knocked on the door a few minutes later. When I let him in, he greeted me with the same gentle smile that had become so familiar. We sat on the balcony with 2 glasses of wine, the sunset painting the sky in soft gold. He reached for my hand, not to control but to connect, a simple gesture, steady and genuine. "I am glad our paths crossed," he said. "Me too," I answered, and this time my voice did not tremble. After he left that night, I walked through my home slowly, letting the quiet sink in. For so long I had lived small. I had let myself be talked over, dismissed, managed. I had convinced myself that silence was safer than speaking up. But the truth was simple. Silence does not protect you. It only teaches others that your voice does not matter. The moment I chose myself, everything changed. I found a job that valued my mind, a home that reflected my choices, a circle of people who respected me, a future built on my decisions, not someone else's. And most importantly, I found the version of myself I thought I had lost forever. If you are listening to this and any part of my story feels familiar, I want you to remember something. You are not stuck, you are not powerless, and you are never too old or too late to start again. Sometimes the life you deserve is waiting just outside the door you are afraid to open. Thank you for spending this time with me. If my story touched you in any way, let me know by liking this video, sharing it, and leaving a comment about where you're watching from. I would love to hear your story too. New chapters begin every day. You just have to choose yours.